Welcome back to the Markout Movie Podcast. This is Brendan Spivey, and today I am debuting a new series here on YouTube on the Markout Movie Podcast channel um, called "What Am I Reading?" Been doing it on the Anchor app for our podcast, but today I'm gonna do my first. What am I reading? I read "Flu" by Wayne Simmons. I'll give you the synopsis real quick. There's a nasty flu going around, an epidemic, they call it. The posters say to cover your mouth when you sneeze and throw away the tissue. But such simple measures won't help. Because when you catch this flu, armed police come and lock you in your house to die alone. When you catch this flu, it kills you in days. And 2 hours after it's killed you, your eyelids snap open again. It was given a 3.55 on Goodreads. And I will go right into the story. For me, what I thought of this story, I thought it was pretty cool. I hadn't read a zombie story novel probably since Cell. I think that was the last one. Pure zombie story that I read by Stephen King, which I'm in my minority. I didn't love that book, but a lot of people do. I hated the movie even worse. But Flu, for me, if I can compare it to anything, I guess I would compare it to George Romero's Night of the Living Dead. Really, you start the prologue starts off with these two cops. The town they're in Belfast, Ireland. It's chaotic. That flu has just hit. It's killing people. They're having to lock people up, as the synopsis said, and they end up locking a woman and her child up, who will later on come into play in this story. Then it just cuts to these two guys, this guy and this girl, on the streets, and they're trying to get to this house, and they end up getting in this house. He thinks she might be infected, so they lock her up until they come across the two cops. Well, no, that's not exactly how it happens. She gets out and locks them up. Then the cops come in from the beginning, and it like I said, it kind of reminds me of Night of the Living Dead a little bit. That these it's more about these characters than the zombie apocalypse. But I dug this story. I thought it was cool. Didn't necessarily think the zombies were that fleshed out, but they didn't need to be, because it really wasn't about them. It was about these people surviving in this house that would go on runs like Walking Dead. But then you had a different storyline going with this guy named Pat and Karen. Karen was a teenage girl. Pat was like a father figure to her that she happened to meet. And, he's got his issues. Something happened with his family early on before all this broke out. So I loved their dynamic. I loved, as far as the other three, it was McCall. I can't remember the guy's name. He was all tattooed out. They always called him Tattoo. They always make reference to his tattoos. And Jerry was the lead girl. Followed by the two cops was George, who was my favorite character in the book, and Norman. Then there was another storyline going on that they didn't really pay much attention to. Really, it didn't get much focus. It got maybe 3 to 5% of the book. They were like scientists, and I think their storyline takes place in the sequel more so than the first book. But they just didn't have much at all to do with this story. The ending they did, but overall they really didn't have much to do. I think what I like about the story though is the human characters. You're not crossing that line, and it's hard not to compare it to Walking Dead. With it's been on 9-10 seasons now. Things you see on that show, and I have stopped watching right after the war ended between Rick and Negan. I hadn't seen the episode since then, but I will say the certain aspect of the story reminded me of The Walking Dead as well. Of course, it would. I mean, everybody is inspired by George Romero in some way. So, I'm not the biggest George Romero fan, but I recognize he is the godfather of zombies. Without him, there wouldn't be the zombie genre, really. I'm not saying he was the first one to do it, but he is the first one that made it mainstream. And so, therefore, to me, he's the godfather of it. I respect him for it. But, I haven't always been the biggest fan of his films. Uh, but that's not to say I don't respect him. I don't think he made a good film. I think Night of the Living Dead is pretty good. But get back to this story called Flu. You know, uh, once you know, once George and Norman come into this house with this girl and these other two guys, there's tension there, and they actually end up letting another guy in who's stranded. He was one of the scientists in a camp. They had camps, and so that again reminded me of Walking Dead. Of course, it would, but this guy's not a good guy. He he's not. He's not a good guy at all. He actually tries to rape Jerry in one scene. In his book. Spoilers, sorry, but what I felt this book actually lacked, though, it lacked an ending, um, a proper ending, because it builds up to all these characters, right? And, Pat and Karen are going to meet up with these other characters, right? That's where it's leading. But there's like 40 pages to go in the book. They still haven't met up, but people start dying, and I feel like you've got to know these characters. You should feel more than you feel when they die, um, and they really start dying in the last 40 pages, uh, and I feel that you don't feel the effect that you should feel, and it just kind of ends. The woman and her child come back and play, like I said they would. They come back and play in this story, and it took, like, it was a serious type book that dealt with zombies. It was very serious, and I loved that. And then the ending, it just threw you a big ball of cheese that wasn't on the same level as the rest of the book, and it kind of took me out of it. But overall, I enjoyed reading it. I'm reading the sequel called Fever right now by Wayne Simmons. Um, I think it's different, but as far as Flu goes, I think it's an enjoyable read. It's very fast paced. Um, it's just the ending lacks, really, and that's unfortunate. But hey, I still had a good time reading it. It's not a perfect book, but it's a good book. It's a very if you like zombie books, you'll be entertained by it. In the discussion, you'll be entertained, and that's basically it. There's not a lot of zombie violence though, and I was expecting more zombie violence. Didn't get it. I don't know. It just didn't get it. But that's basically it. I mean, I don't really know what else to take. It's a rather short book. It's like 248 pages. Uh, you know, um, now the next was like over 300 something, so it's a little bit bigger book. But overall, it's just short. I mean, I enjoyed it. The zombie violence we got, I enjoyed. You get a lot towards the end of the book, but it's a character piece. That's all I got to say about it. So my score here on the what am I reading? Mark Out Movie Podcast score. I'm gonna give it three out of five. It was a very entertaining read. I had fun with it. I think it was a blast. Until we got to the last 40 pages where the violence really happens. But there's a scene with Jerry and what's his name? I cannot think of the guy's name for the life of me. They end up leaving George and Norman behind on a run, and for whatever reason, this reminds me when Shane left Otis in A Walking Dead season 2. He left him to die, and it reminds me of that scene. I don't know why. It just does. But of course, Norman's. I ain't gonna spoil anything. It's a very nice read though. I think if you love zombies, you'll love it or really enjoy it. I enjoyed it. I love zombies. I'm very critical of certain zombie films, but I love them. But yeah, I give it a 3 out of 5. I think it's a solid zombie read. I think if you're into it, you will enjoy it. If you're not into reading about zombies, you probably won't enjoy it. That's my final thoughts. So hopefully you enjoyed this review, and I'll be back next time on what am I reading with Fever, the sequel. So that's an interesting beginning, I will say. But until next time, I am Brandon Spivey. I'm from the Mark Out Movie Podcast, so hopefully you enjoyed this review of What Am I Reading. Until next time. Until next time.